So look, if you're in real estate, you've heard farming. You've heard the term farming in one way or another. I remember the very first time I heard farming, I wasn't sure what people meant. I mean, this was about 16 years ago. So I'm like, farming? Explain to me what that means. Right. And then I heard other people call it canvassing. And then I heard other terms. So look, the point is farming includes you in some way connecting with a community, whether it's door knocking, whether it's mailing, whether it's retargeting, newsletter. There's a whole way of doing this. And I want to dig into this for about 10 minutes. So I'm a little late. I usually do this 2 hours earlier, but I was at Starbucks meeting my team because they're out tomorrow. It's a long weekend, so I know some of them are out. Well, let's get into this one. When it comes to farming, there are some stats that you need to be aware of. And those stats come from NAR, National Association of Realtors. And I want to share some with you so you better understand how we approach this and why we do the things we do. I'm going to share this with you. Let me just scroll up. And here we go. So this I'll put into the YouTube channel so you can have it too. It's on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, it's not on there. So you have to go to the YouTube channel to get this. But this is one of two pages that I love. Homesellers and their selling experience. There are some things that I want to share here with you because it gives us an insight as to how to approach this. And look at this. I'm going to zoom into this. Well, not zoom in, but I'm going to highlight this one. 69% of all sellers moved within the same state. For younger millennials, 81% purchased in the same state compared to 63% of older baby boomers. Why is that important? Because it matters with the marketing that you're doing. It matters with what you're sending out and how you're communicating with them ahead of time. All right, now look over here too, because this is important too as far as the psychology that people have when they want to sell. For all sellers, the most commonly cited reason for selling their home was the desire to move closer to friends and family, right? And then you can read all the rest of them. That was the number one thing. Now, I'm going to go back to you really quick. Think about your approach. Think of what you're mailing out. What does that look like if you're mailing out? Think of when you're talking to people in person and you know that certain people are thinking of doing certain things. You at least know how to communicate with the marketing, right? This is why it's key. I'm going to go into a little bit more what you need to be doing, but let's take a look at some of these other stats and follow me on this one. I'm going to scroll over to page 127. So I had to read this whole thing to make sure we got the right things. But here's page 127, home selling and the real estate professional. Now, this is important to understand what happens if they use you as the real estate agent. Because, look, at the end of the day, we need to show up. And if we show up and we do the things we are supposed to do, guess what happens? They end up using us. The consumer ends up using us and referring us. Look at this. The typical seller has recommended their agent. Well, let me go there. The typical seller has recommended their agent once since selling their home. 38% of sellers recommended their agent 3 or more times since selling their home. That number jumped to 42% among Gen Xers. You know why that's important? I'm going to go back to you on this one. It's important because it shows you if you're doing this routinely, if you're showing up, if your branding is showing up in the right way and delivering the message that can connect with the person that's reading it, guess what happens? There's a trust that happens, whether it's on social media or actual postcards, because I'm going to share mine with you. Now, let's go into a little bit of what we do. I did this yesterday. I want to dig in a little bit more because now I have an example for you. This is what we do. If you missed it yesterday, here it is again, and I'll put up the link. We typically mail out in different areas. We mail out about 10,000 pieces a month, separate pieces. So 24 mailers total in 12 months. And this is what it looks like. 6 local market stats, 4 things to do, blah, blah, blah. And out of all the things we send out, this one gets us the biggest response all the time. One of those mailers out of the 24, top 5 books to read this year. And people respond to that. They love it. The quotes one has also gotten us a great response. And I break it down here for you as well. And go deeper and deeper and deeper. I'll give this over to you. It's in the chat. Sorry, in the description on the YouTube channel. Now I'm going to go to this other piece that I've got, not this one. I'm going to go to this one because here's where I'm going to show you an example of something that we send out. This is what the market stats look like. Now, this isn't the only thing we send out. We try to treat the mailers that we're sending, we try to treat it kind of like social media, right? So this is the market. The market is changing, right? Here we've got some Malibu stats. Prices are incredibly high. But check out what we do on the back end. And this is only one of 4 that we're currently testing out. If you want to go ahead and scan that right there, what happens, it'll send you to one of our landing pages. This is specifically one of our website landing pages, because what we're noticing is that a lot of people are using QR codes. They're actually scanning them. Our other one, which is not this one, will send you to our HomeBot process. So this way, when they register, we know, and then they start getting these notifications. But we're A/B testing all the time. But scan that one so you get a better idea of what's happening. Now, the other part to this is this. This is the one I really wanted to share with you, because what I've noticed is that we lack creativity when it comes to farming, when it comes to diving deeper into a community. And besides door knocking, and let me stop sharing this really quick because I've got something for you. Besides door knocking, and by the way, if you're door knocking and you're using the Chime app, I'm going to show you here really quick. So I'm going to zoom out really quick. This is Point Doom. Let me see if you can see that. All right, that's Point Doom in Malibu. We've got like $1 million homes there. I'm going to click on an area. This is the Chime app. I'm going to click there. And then all of a sudden, you see how a little property pops up. Let me see if it can, right there. All right. This one's 29245 Cliffside Drive. It says add door knock. Well, this app, it's built into all of our CRM, so we can actually door knock, right? This is Chime. So when we go out, if we talk to anybody, we just click where we're at because it tracks us. And we're like, oh, we just finished talking to Joe, and here are some notes. Boom, 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 done. So I love that part about door knocking. You've got to get a little bit more creative, and you have to put everybody on a CRM. Why? Because when we're door knocking, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I'll tell you a story. But first, when we're door knocking, you've got to give them something. And I learned that early on because the very first day, I'm going to tell you a story, and then we'll go into this. Very first day I got my license. I don't remember what day it was, but I remember what I did. I got my license, and I'm like, damn, this is amazing. This is gonna change my life. And it did. But I went door knocking for 6 hours that day. I suited up, put on my suit, put on my tie, put on my dress shoes, and I went door knocking. And what I learned super quickly, because I kind of just went out there and did it, I learned later on that you need to give something in order to kind of break that process of trust, because people don't know you when you're, I was like 24, 25. I'm going out there. People thought I was Jehovah's Witness. People would yell at me through the doors like, go away. I don't want your God. I'm like, no, I'm not Jehovah's Witness. I'm just a real estate agent. They're like, oh. And then I'd give them the flyer, right, of just the local stats, very similar to that postcard that I showed you. And then that would have them look at it and be like, oh, and then I would say, hey, look, I'm Tristan. And I started off with Century 21. So I'd be like, hey, I'm Tristan with Century 21. I'm just door knocking the neighbors. I live across the street and I door knocked my neighborhood. And so I'm just letting everybody know what's happening in the area. Do you by any chance know of anybody that's wanting to sell? And they'd be like, no. And I'm pretty happy where I'm at. I'm going to die here. And then they would be like, well, thank you. And I'd be like, hey, one more thing. Can I keep you updated by email? And then, yeah, sure, why not? And if you already strike that conversation and you see that they're friendly, what starts happening is now you start building a whole separate farm on a newsletter, letting them know what's happening, letting them know what's going on, what's in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, now you have another way to touch them. Now, in the world that we live in now, because when I started, Facebook wasn't around. The world that we live in now, there is no reason you shouldn't have a Facebook group for a community. It could be a smaller niche like a track home area, or it could be a wider range like my friend Blair. Blair's got one for living North Phoenix. and it covers a wider area. Now, if you're door knocking and you've got their email and you're talking to them a second time because they know you, now you can add them to the Facebook group, right? And then it keeps growing off of that. So start thinking of other ways you're going to be able to communicate with them because it matters. Now, let me go back to this. The next thing that you can do is mail. And I didn't start off with mailing at the very beginning. I started off with just plain door knocking. But the mailers, like I showed you, now we're up to 24 in a year and we alternate. Why? Because we were noticing that the messaging really matters. And we just tweak the messaging now too to talk to the consumers about what they're most concerned about right now. What is that right now? They're concerned about the crash, the bubble. They're concerned about their home prices, what's happening, right? And we're addressing that with the mailers. So now we go back here, the online community. It's not just about building out a Facebook group. It's about creating a blog. Like, tell me as the consumer, and you're door knocking, tell me what's happening. Tell me what I should be paying attention to, where I should be taking my kids, what parks, what's good to eat out here, all of that. Be of value, right? Because the deeper you dig into that, the more you can connect with people because you're truly trying to help them out. Now, let me go back to this. As you're doing this online community, think it's not just blog and social. Think it's also YouTube. Like, what else can you do? If you look at what TikTok has done really well just over the last year, is that when you go niche, right? You're showing people, hey, I'm just door knocking in the neighborhood out here in Malibu, right? And you tag it. TikTok listens, number one, to what you're saying. So if you're using the word Malibu or your area, and if you put that in the description and you tag where you're located, it circles the area for you. The algorithm finds those people that are closest to you and shows that video to them. So now, not only are you going through, and I'm saying here, door knocking, you're mailing, you have an online community, you have a blog, you have your YouTube video, and now you're doing short videos. And then every time you meet somebody, you're writing them a note like, hey, I just met Joe and I talked to them. Like, I met this little old lady a long time ago, and we're still like note buddies. I don't know if it was my first year. I'm door knocking and it's a hot day. It gets hot out here. And she says, and this happened a lot, but I remember this one. She says, oh, no, I've never seen you around here before, but look, you're so hot and you're sweating. Come on in. She's like 80 years old. Well, now she is. She was like a little younger then. She's like, come on in. And I'll give you a glass of water. I'm like, okay, cool, sure. So I go in there, we start talking, and I'm just thinking at that point, this lady's like the nicest lady I've ever met. She doesn't know me. She's inviting me for water. And those are the moments you're looking for when you're door knocking. Those are the moments that you create relationships. And like me, when I created this relationship with this amazing woman, right now, like we literally send notes to each other. And I'm like, when did this happen? But this business, the thing that no one can take away from us, Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, anyone, is that it's a relationship business. And if you treat it that way in everything that you do, specifically this, door knocking, farming, creating this value, and thinking, I'm going to create a relationship with every person that I talk to, now all of a sudden it changes. Because now, when you finish talking to somebody that you engage with, it doesn't end there. You don't just put them into your CRM and let the automation take over. You sit down and you write a note to them, or you go to handwritten and you write a note on your computer, and then the computer pen from handwritten sends out one that's handwritten with a pen, right? They don't know otherwise, and it looks beautiful. So think of those things now. What's going to allow you to connect with people in an authentic manner? Because that's what's missing, right? Don't think large scale. Think, how can I go super niche and then grow from there? Because that's where you learn, right? That's where I started door knocking. That was the very first thing I did. And then I realized every hour, because I was tracking, right? I have this little piece of paper and I'm like, okay, home, not home, home, not home. Oh, I talked to this person. They were really nice. There's their email address. And then I realized, for every hour that goes by, I'm hitting 13 people. And these are normal size homes, not like massive mansions on Malibu. I'm talking about the inside, like Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village. Every hour I get 13 people home, and I'm like, this is interesting. Does this stand true in the morning too? And then I start realizing, wait a second, these areas are different. If I go to townhomes and condos, I'm finding a different demographic and they're home at different times. Versus if I go to this area, it's different. And then I'm like, well, why don't I just start door knocking multi-million-dollar homes? And I did. And guess what? I didn't find them at certain times. I found a lot of people that were doing the house sitting, the maids, just not the actual owners. And so I want you to start thinking, well, what are the possibilities here? And then I'll end it here. As you do this more and more often, and you start breaking in slowly into a community, think of community events, right? Think how often do you want to do this? And I have a lot of friends that do this for a community. We don't. But I can tell you, if you do, think of Easter, think of Thanksgiving, think of Christmas. If you do those, you have opportunities to connect with the community because you'd be the first one to do a movie at the park where you invite a whole track. I mean, where I live, there's about 2,000 homes here. And we've done the movie thing for community events. We did that pre-COVID. It went very well. We just didn't continue it. But I know people that do these amazing events with Easter where they do it in the local park and they invite everybody through their mailers, right? Or they go door knocking. So think of those things that you can do. And lastly, here where it says press release, as you grow like we have in farming, don't forget about PR. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people do. When you go PR, public relations, and you hire a local company, all of a sudden they put you in the local news, right? The newspapers, the local magazines, and then the local news stations. And that all happens from PR. So that's later along. So right now I want you to focus on farming. The world around you is changing. You have an opportunity to connect with people through creating these relationships, long-term relationships. What does that look like for you? What does that look like? Where do you want to start? Around your home where you live, like I did, right? Or do you want to start somewhere else that really inspires you, where it's about 15 minutes to drive there? Just don't make it too far because you need to show up on a daily basis. Like, thanks for tuning in tonight. I'm a little bit late tonight, but tomorrow I'll do it a little bit earlier. I hope you have an awesome day, everybody.